Buckle up, philosophy fans, as we embark on an epic journey through the labyrinth minds of three of history's heaviest hitters: Socrates, Plato, and Aristotle. These ancient Greek thought titans, they didn't just dip their toes in the philosophical pool. They dove in headfirst, splashed around vigorously, and forever changed the landscape of Western thinking. Actually, they sort of built the pool we're in. So grab your togas or your favorite comfy thinking outfit. Hey dudes, anyone? Because we're about to go deep into the Aegean Sea of ideas. Picture this. You're strolling through the agora in ancient Athens, and you're minding your own business, eating a gyro, wondering if it's called a gyro or a gyro, when suddenly a short, snub-nosed guy with a wild beard starts peppering you with questions about justice, virtue, and the nature of knowledge. Congratulations! You've just met Socrates, the original philosophical troublemaker. Let's talk about some of his key concepts. First is the Socratic Method, and this isn't your average Q&A session. Socrates developed a form of cooperative, argumentative dialogue. It's like intellectual jitsu. He would ask seemingly simple questions, let his inoculators, that's the $5 word of the day, tie themselves in knots with their own answers, and then help them untangle their thoughts. He invented the gotcha moment before gotcha journalism was even a thing or Kanye was even a meme. Now, Socrates' use of the Socratic method was revolutionary for the time, because instead of simply lecturing and pontificating or delivering pre-packaged wisdom that came in a box, he engaged his students in active back and forth discussion. The goal was not to impart knowledge, but to guide his inoculators or students towards a deeper understanding through their own reasoned responses and critical reflection. Now, this approach, it was in stark contrast to much of the wisdom of the day. Much of the day was concerned with winning arguments and impressing audiences. It had more to do with your ability as an orator than genuine philosophical inquiry. And Socrates wanted to strip away the veneer of certainty and force his students to confront the limits of their own knowledge. So it was a profoundly humbling experience for all involved, and it was one that he believed was essential for true wisdom and virtue. The Socratic method has had a lasting impact on Western educational practices, from the Socratic seminars used in many humanities classrooms to the Socratic questioning techniques employed in fields like law and medicine. By encouraging active engagement and self-examination, Socrates laid the groundwork for critical thinking skills that remain essential in modern world. The second piece was know thyself. Socrates famously claimed, "I know that I know nothing." And it's not false modesty. It's a radical call for self-examination and intellectual humility. He's basically saying, check yourself before you wreck yourself. It's bad for your philosophical health. And this idea of self-knowledge as the foundation for wisdom, it was a core tenet of Socratic philosophy. Socrates believed that the unexamined life was not worth living. I'm sure you've heard that before. And that true knowledge began with an honest reckoning of one's own ignorance and limitations. Only by stripping away our preconceptions and illusions could we hope to approach the truth. And the imperative to know thyself has echoed through the centuries, inspiring everything from the personal, introspective, championed by Stoic philosophers to the self-awareness cultivated in modern mindfulness practices. Socrates recognized that genuine wisdom does not come from accumulating facts or mastering disciplines, but from the difficult work of understanding our own thoughts, beliefs, and biases. So in an age where knowledge is increasingly siloed and specialized, Socrates' insistence on holistic self-knowledge, it remains a vital counterpoint. And he reminds us that true wisdom requires not just intellectual prowess, but also moral and emotional intelligence. The ability to look inward and grapple with the complexity of our own humanity. The third piece was the examined life. Examined life is not worth living, he declared, not knowing that someday this would be a sticker on a lot of MacBook Airs at college campuses. Now, he wasn't suggesting we become navel-gazers, but rather that we should constantly question our beliefs and assumptions. It's like the original advocate for lifelong learning minus the online courses and YouTube tutorials. And Socrates saw philosophical inquiry not as a means to an end, but as an end in itself. For him, the process of questioning, analyzing, and challenging one's own thoughts and behaviors was the key to a fulfilling and virtuous existence. It was a rejection of the complacency and dogmatism that he saw in a lot of his fellow Athenians, who were all too willing to accept the status quo without scrutiny. Now, by insisting on the examined life, Socrates positioned philosophy as a transformative and empowering practice, not just this abstract intellectual exercise. He wanted his students to develop the habit of critical self-reflection, to constantly interrogate their own assumptions and biases. This, he believed, was the pathway to genuine wisdom and ethical action. Now, Socrates' emphasis on the examined life has had a profound impact on Western thought. It's influenced everything from the Stoic pursuit of self-mastery to the modern field of positive psychology. His call to constantly question and challenge ourselves, it remains a vital counterpoint to the tendency towards complacency and dogmatism that can creep up in our personal and societal beliefs. The fourth thing was virtue ethics. He believed that knowledge and virtue were deeply intertwined. If you truly understand what's good, he says, you'll act accordingly. It's a bit like saying once you know better, you do better, but with more hemlock and fewer inspirational Instagram posts. And at the heart of Socrates' virtue ethics was the idea that moral behavior was not just a matter of following rules or maximizing utility, but of cultivating the right disposition and character traits. For Socrates, virtues like courage and temperance and justice and wisdom were not just abstract ideas out there, but they were the foundation for a life well lived. And the emphasis on virtue was the key to ethical conduct, and that stood in contrast to many of the prevailing moral frameworks of the time, which were often more focused on consequences or social conventions. And Socrates argued that true morality stems not from eternal rewards or punishments, but from an innate understanding of what was right and good. So he links knowledge and virtue very closely, and he challenges the notion that we can simply know the right thing to do without also embodying it. His vision of the virtuous person was one who had internalized ethical principles to the point that they acted rightly without even thinking about it. A paragon of moral excellence rather than a mere rule follower. Socratic virtue ethics would go on to have a profound influence on many later philosophical traditions, from Aristotle's own articulation of the golden mean to the Christian emphasis on cultivating spiritual and moral values. Even today, his ideas continue to resonate in fields like moral psychology and positive organizational scholarship. 5 was the Socratic paradoxes, and these mind-bending statements include gems like no one does wrong willingly, and it's better to suffer wrong than to do wrong. And they're not just provocative bumper sticker material, they're challenging our basic assumptions about morality and human nature. His paradoxical pronouncements were not just mere rhetorical flourishes, but rather the product of his kind of relentless, logical reasoning and his deep commitment to moral truth. By seemingly contradicting common sense notions of right and wrong, he forced his students to re-examine the most fundamental beliefs about the nature of virtue and wrongdoing. The no one does wrong willingly paradox, for example, stemmed from his conviction that genuine knowledge of the good would naturally lead to virtuous acts. If we truly understand what is right, how could we then choose to do what is wrong? Now, this challenged the prevailing view that people sometimes knowingly engage in immoral behavior. Similarly, the idea that it is better to suffer wrong than to do wrong struck at the heart of traditional notions of justice and retribution. Socrates argued that the true harm in wrongdoing lies not in the consequences one faces, but in the damage done to one's character and soul. From this perspective, the morally upright individual who chooses to endure injustice rather than compromise their own virtue is truly demonstrating a life of character. Now, these paradoxes were not meant to be taken as absolute truths, but rather they were provocations to deeper philosophical reflection. Socrates knew that by unsettling our comfortable assumptions, he could push us towards a more rigorous and nuanced understanding of life, ethics, and human nature. And in this way, his seemingly contradictory statements served as a crucial tool for expanding the boundaries of moral discourse. Socrates' influence, it's hard to overstate. Like, he never wrote anything down. Talk about plain hard to get. But his ideas, preserved through his students, particularly Plato, become the foundation for much of Western philosophy. He's kind of like the philosophical Big Bang, and everything else exploded from this point on. And his method to questioning and critical thinking, you're still going to find it in law schools, ethics classes, and occasionally by precocious children who discover the power of why. He showed us the path to wisdom often involves admitting our own ignorance, a lesson that's as relevant in our age of online echo chambers as it was in ancient Athens. Socrates' trial and execution for corrupting the youth, did Tipper Gore put him on trial? Turned him into a martyr for free thought. It's like he was the original rebel without a cause, except his cause was, the pursuit of wisdom and truth. And his willingness to die for his principles, it really set a powerful example that would inspire philosophers and a lot of angsty teenagers for millennia to come. So if Socrates was the philosophical match that lit the fire, Plato was the one who turned it into a roaring blaze. This student of Socrates and teacher of Aristotle, he didn't just continue his master's work, he built an entire philosophical skyscraper on those foundations. Wax on, wax off. I think his philosophical sensei trained him well. Some of the key concepts for Plato is first, the theory of forms. And this is Plato's greatest hit. He argues that beyond our physical world of changing, imperfect things, there exists a realm of perfect, unchanging forms or ideas. It's like he's saying the chair you're sitting on, or the computer you're looking at, the screen you're looking at, it's just a pale imitation of the perfect computer chair that exists in the world of forms. And Plato's theory of forms, it's a foundational element of his metaphysics and epistemology. He believed that the physical world we experience through our senses is a mere reflection of a higher transcendent realm of pure eternal forms. And these forms represent the true essence or ideal of each thing, from chairs to screens to tables, but then also the jump to justice and beauty itself. So for Plato, the ultimate goal of philosophy is to transcend that shifting, illusory world of appearances and gain direct knowledge of these perfect forms. He saw the physical world as inherently unstable, unreliable, whereas the realm of forms represented true, immutable reality. And this idea of a higher, Platonic realm of ideals has had a profound and lasting impact on Western thought. It has influenced everything from medieval Christian theology, with God often taking the place of the forms of the good, to modern abstract mathematics. So any time someone talks about the true essence of something, they're actually echoing Plato. And this isn't just about abstract navel-gazing. For Plato, understanding these forms, it was the key to understanding reality itself. It's a bit like saying that to truly understand your favorite meme, you need to grasp the Platonic idea of memeness. Second was the allegory of the cave. Picture this: a group of people have been chained in a cave all their lives facing a blank wall. They watch shadows projected on the wall from objects passing in front of a fire behind them and believe these shadows are real. Plato is saying that's us. We think we know reality, but we're just watching a shadow puppet show. But here's the kicker. Plato argues that philosophers are the ones who break free from the chains, turn around and see the true nature of reality. It's like the Matrix, but with more togas and fewer kung fu scenes. But we could use both having Keanu Reeves. The allegory of the cave is one of Plato's most famous and enduring metaphors. It powerfully illustrates his belief that the physical world we experience, it's but a shadow of a higher, truer reality, the realm of forms. And just as the cave dwellers mistake the flickering shadows for reality, so too we often mistake the changing, imperfect world of appearances for the genuine article. But Plato saw philosophers as those rare individuals who, through the power of reason and critical inquiry, are able to break free of these mental shackles and ascend to the dazzling light of true knowledge. And this metaphor has become a touchstone for understanding Plato's epistemology and his conviction that the path to wisdom, it lies in transcending the limits of ordinary perception. The third part for Plato was the tripartite soul. Plato divides the soul into three parts. There is the rational. This is the thinking part located in the head. There is the spirited, that's the feeling part located in the chest, and the appetitive, the desiring part. And you probably can guess where that's located, in the belly. It's like Plato invented the original brain, heart, and gut decision-making model. He argues that a just person is one in which all three parts play their proper role, with reason in charge. He's basically saying, let your head rule, your heart, and your stomach. Which is great advice unless you're at a buffet, then you better let loose, baby. And this model of the soul was a crucial element of his larger ethical and ultimately political philosophy. He saw the ideal human as one in which the rational part of the soul, this part concerned with wisdom, justice, and the pursuit of truth, was in control, guiding the spirited and appetitive parts through virtuous ends. And the concept of the soul as this kind of harmonious balance of competing facets was influential, not just in ancient Greek thought, but in later philosophical and theological traditions as well. The notion of reason as the rightful ruler of emotions and desires, it has been a touchstone of Western philosophy from the Stoics to Kant and beyond. And his model also informed the vision of his ideal society, as outlined in his most famous work, The Republic. Just as the individual soul should be governed by reason, so too should the state be led by philosopher kings who have attained the highest level of philosophical wisdom and virtue. The philosopher king, in his work, The Republic, Plato argues that the ideal ruler would be a philosopher king, someone who loves wisdom more than power. It's like he's saying, imagine if Socrates was in power instead of those power-hungry kings who put him on trial. This idea has inspired and it has frustrated political thinkers ever since. Plato's concept of the philosopher king, it represented his belief that true justice and true societal flourishing could only be achieved under the leadership of those who had devoted themselves to the pursuit of wisdom and the pursuit of virtue. And he saw the majority of people as being ruled by their more baser impulses and desires, that they were ruling from their gut and they were unfit for governing. And the philosopher king, on the other hand, would be someone who had ascended to the highest level of philosophical inquiry, understanding, and was able to perceive the nature of justice, goodness, and ideal social order. So guided by this superior knowledge, the philosopher king would then use that power to shape the state in accordance with these eternal principles. And so Plato's vision of the philosopher king has been celebrated, but it's also been criticized over the centuries. On the one hand, it does speak to a deep-seated human desire for a benevolent, enlightened ruler who can guide society toward the greater good. And on other hands, it's been seen by some as a dangerous elevation of a technocratic elitism over just democratic self-governance. Nonetheless, the idea of the philosopher king, it does continue to captivate political thinkers, from medieval Islamic philosophers to Renaissance humanists, to modern proponents of technocratic governance. Plato's central insight that wisdom and virtue should be guiding principles of political leadership remains a powerful and enduring challenge to more conventional notions of power and authority. And then we get to Platonic love. Plato's conception of Platonic love, it's a far cry from the romantic, passionate notion of love that we're more familiar with today. You imagine Plato's version of love as a Hallmark movie. But for him, love was not primarily about physical desire or even necessarily emotional attachment. But rather, he saw love, it was more of a vehicle to attain spiritual and intellectual ascent. And according to Plato, the journey of love begins with an appreciation of physical beauty, which then leads to the appreciation of the beauty of the soul and character, and from there, the love transcends higher, developing a love for the beauty of institutions, laws, and knowledge itself. A little bit of a leap there, but in his mind, this ultimately would culminate in the process of this profound love and reverence for the form of beauty, the pure, eternal essence of beauty that transcends the physical world. Now, this Platonic vision of love as a path to philosophical enlightenment has had a lasting impact on Western thought and culture. It has influenced everything from medieval courtly love traditions to modern theories of romantic love as a spiritual and intellectual union. Even the idea of falling in love with an idea has its root in Plato's concept of the love of wisdom. At the same time, Plato's elevation of the love of wisdom over more carnal forms of desire, it has been subject of much debate and critique. Some have kind of viewed it as an overly idealistic or even at times misogynistic, given his apparent devaluation of physical passions and the feminine. Nonetheless, his ideas about the transformative power of love, they do continue to resonate with those seeking a more elevated philosophical understanding of the concept. And the sixth, which is a $10 word, is anamnesia. Plato believed that learning is actually a process of remembering knowledge that our immortal souls knew before birth. It's like he invented the original past life regression therapy, but for abstract concepts instead of your supposed life as Cleopatra's cat. Now, Plato's concept here of recollection was closely tied to his theory of forms. He believed the human soul existed in the realm of forms prior to being incarnated in the physical world. And during this pre-embodied state, the soul had direct knowledge of the perfect, eternal essence of things. When the soul is born into the material realm, it becomes shrouded by illusions and imperfections of the physical world. Learning, then, is not the acquisition of new knowledge, but rather the process of recalling or remembering the truths that the soul already possessed. This is why Plato saw education as a kind of recollection rather than mere instruction. And this idea has had a profound influence on Western thought, particularly in the realms of epistemology and metaphysics. Plato's view that true knowledge comes not from the senses, but from the soul's innate connection to the realm of forms, challenged prevailing notions of empiricism, and it did lay the groundwork later for rationalist traditions within philosophy. Moreover, Plato's belief in the immortality of the soul and its pre-existence before physical incarnation has also resonated with many religious and spiritual traditions, from Neoplatonism to Gnosticism, which is a Christian heresy. And the concept of recollection continues to be a source of fascination and debate for thinkers grappling with the nature of knowledge, memory, and the human condition. And Plato's influence on Western thought, it's like the philosophical equivalent of the Beatles' influence on music. It's everywhere, even if you don't recognize it. His academy, which is founded in Athens around 387 BC, is considered the first institution of higher learning in the Western world. It's like he invented the university, but there were more dialogues with fewer cake parties. And Plato's writings, mostly in the form of dialogues featuring Socrates as the main character, they cover an astounding range of topics, from ethics and politics to metaphysics and epistemology. He's sort of like the original polymath, the Renaissance man before the Renaissance was even a twinkle in history's eye. His theory of forms has been debated, critiqued, and reworked by philosophers for over 2 millennia. And so whether you're talking about medieval Christian theology, modern idealism, or even certain interpretations of quantum physics, you can actually trace a line back to Plato's forms. It's like he planted a philosophical seed that grew into a whole forest of ideas. If Socrates was the gadfly and Plato the dreamer, Aristotle was the ancient world's version of a scientific powerhouse. This student of Plato and tutor of Alexander the Great, he didn't just philosophize, he observed, categorized, and theorized about everything from logic to biology to poetry. So some of his key concepts first are logic and the soliloquy, or syllogism. Aristotle basically invented formed logic, his system of syllogistic reasoning. If A equals B and B equals C, then A equals C. It's kind of like the original coding language for rational thought. He's the reason we can say things like all men are mortal. Socrates is a man, therefore Socrates is mortal, without our brains exploding. And Aristotle's work on logic was a crucial advance in the development of philosophical inquiry. By formulating the rules of valid reasoning, he provided thinkers with a powerful tool for analyzing arguments, identifying fallacies, and arriving at sound conclusions. And his work became the foundational structure for deductive logic. And Aristotle's logical framework had a profound impact not just on philosophy, but really on the entire trajectory of Western thought. His principles of logic undergird the foundations for mathematics, computer science, and artificial intelligence. Even in our daily lives, we actually rely on Aristotelian logic to navigate the complexities of language, reasoning, and decision-making. Beyond its practical applications, Aristotle's logic also, it served as a crucial counterpoint to Plato's more intuitive metaphysical approach to philosophy. Whereas Plato emphasized the importance of grasping the eternal forms, Aristotle focused on developing rigorous methods for analyzing the physical world and the nature of knowledge itself. And this tension between Plato's idealism and Aristotle's empiricism would continue to play out in the history of Western philosophy, shaping the development of everything from medieval scholasticism to the Enlightenment. Aristotle's legacy as the formal logic father remains kind of a cornerstone of philosophical inquiry to this day. This then leads us to the four causes. Aristotle argued that to understand something fully, you have to grasp its four causes. First, the material cause, what's it made of? Second, the formal cause, its form or essence. 3, the efficiency cause, the source of change or rest. And the final cause, its purpose or end. It's Aristotle's version of an assembly manual, but far simpler than the ones you find at IKEA. So to build one human, you'll need matter, material, human essence, formal, parents, efficient, and a purpose in life, final, and then some assembly required, and parenting and stuff. Aristotle's doctrine of the four causes represents his attempt to provide a comprehensive framework for understanding the natural world and the things within it. By identifying these four distinct but interrelated factors, he sought to move beyond the static, essentialist worldview of Plato and develop a more dynamic, causal model of reality. And the material and formal causes address the underlying substance and form of a thing, while the efficient and final causes dealt with the processes and purposes that brought it into being and sustained its existence. So together, these four principles formed a holistic approach to scientific and philosophical inquiry that would influence thinkers for centuries to come. And Aristotle's four causes have had a lasting impact on fields ranging from metaphysics, physics, biology, and theology. His insistence on understanding the full causal context of a phenomenon, rather than just its surface features, it laid the groundwork for more sophisticated and nuanced analysis. Even modern system theories and complexity science models can trace some of their roots back to Aristotelian's comprehensive causal model. Third, the golden mean. Aristotle's ethical theory posits that virtue lies in the middle between two vices. Courage, for example, is the mean between cowardice and recklessness. It's like he's saying moderation in all things, including moderation. And this idea has influenced everything from ethical philosophy to self-help books. And at the heart of Aristotle's ethics was the belief that true virtue didn't lie in the extremes, but in the proper balance and harmony of different qualities and dispositions. Just as the perfect musical note is struck by avoiding the overly sharp and overly flat too much, so too must the virtuous person navigate a middle path between deficiency and excess. The concept of the golden mean resonated not just with Aristotle's contemporaries, but with thinkers throughout the Western tradition, and provided a compelling alternative to the more rigid rule-based approach to morality championed by other schools of thought, while still maintaining a commitment to objective standards of right and wrong. Moreover, Aristotle's golden mean had a practical psychological dimension to it. He recognized that true virtue required not just intellectual understanding, but also the cultivation of proper emotional responses and habitual behaviors. The golden mean, then, was not just a philosophical idea, but it was really a guide to the development of good character. And Aristotle's ethics of the golden mean have continued to influence everything from moral philosophy to positive psychology. The idea that true well-being and flourishing comes not just from eliminating desire, but from its proper channeling and moderation, it remains a powerful and relevant challenge to our more aesthetic or rigid approaches to virtue. And then empiricism and classification. Unlike his teacher Plato, Aristotle was big on observation and categorizing. He classified animals, dissected organisms, and tried to understand the natural world through direct study. He's like the original David Attenborough, but with more togas, fewer camera crews, and I don't think he had that sweet, silky voice. Aristotle's emphasis on empirical observation and systematic classification represented a significant departure from Plato's more idealistic and speculative approaches to philosophy. Whereas Plato focused on the realm of internal forms, Aristotle was primarily concerned with understanding the physical world and the natural phenomenon that could directly be observed and studied. And this empirical orientation manifested in Aristotle's numerous works on the natural sciences, including his groundbreaking at the time treatise on biology, zoology, and physics. He was a tireless cataloger and classifier, and he meticulously documented the features and characteristics of plants, animals, and the elements that comprise the material universe. If it was possible, he definitely would have collected stamps. And Aristotle's scientific methodology, which relied on careful observation, experimentation, and the identification of causal relationships, it laid the foundation for the modern scientific method. His insistence on grounding philosophical inquiry in the empirical realities of the natural world, it challenged the more abstract, deductive approaches of his Platonic predecessors, and it paved the way for the emergence of the empiricist tradition in Western thought. So Aristotle's empiricism and classification zeal, they've had a lasting impact on the development of a number of different academic disciplines, from biology to zoology to physics and to astronomy. So his systematic approach to understanding the natural world, it continues to resonate with scientists and philosophers who seek to uncover the underlying patterns and principles that govern the physical universe. The fifth piece was metaphysics. Aristotle coined the term metaphysics, literally after physics, because these books came after his work on physics, and explored questions about the nature of existence, substance, and causality. He's the reason we can have mind-bending conversations about whether a ship that has had all its parts replaced is still the same ship. Aristotle's metaphysics represented a significant departure from Plato's idealistic framework, which posited the existence of a higher, transcendent realm of forms. Aristotle focused his attention on the nature of physical reality and the foundational principles that underlie the material world. And central to Aristotle's metaphysics was the concept of substance, which he saw as the foundational, fundamental building block of existence. Substance for Aristotle, not the mere collection of accidental properties, but rather entities with a unifying essence or form. And this led him to grapple with thorny questions about identity, change, and the nature of causality. Aristotle's metaphysical inquiries into concepts like potentiality and actuality, matter and form, and the prime mover have continued to shape philosophical discourse for centuries. His ideas, they've influenced everything from medieval scholasticism to modern analytic philosophy, as thinkers have wrestled with the fundamental questions about the nature of reality and our place in it. Aristotle, coining the term metaphysics itself, was a significant contribution, as it designated a distinct field of philosophical investigation that went beyond the empirical study of the physical world. And this distinction between physics and metaphysics would prove crucial in the development of Western philosophical traditions, as thinkers sought to reconcile the material and immaterial world, the observable and the transcendent. And poetics. In this work, he analyzes tragedy and epic poetry. He introduces concepts that look at emotionally purging through art. Imagine if he got his hands on a Taylor Swift song. And he argues that the plot is more important than the character in tragedy. It's like he wrote the original Save the Cat for ancient Greek playwrights. And Aristotle's Poetics represents a groundbreaking attempt to establish a systematic analytical framework for understanding the art of poetry and dramatic composition by identifying the core elements of tragedy and epic, such as plot, character, dictation, and speculation. Aristotle, well, he provided a set of critical principles that would shape the development of Western literary criticism for centuries to come. Perhaps most famously, Aristotle's Poetics championed the importance of plot over character, arguing that the well-constructed, casually coherent narrative was the key to any great tragedy, and this emphasis on plot, structure, and dramatic action as the primary drivers of emotional and intellectual engagement had a profound impact on the playwrights and poets of his time, as well as those who followed in their footsteps. And through his work of this emotional purging, this idea of art as a means of emotional purification and moral education, this has been a constant thread that he has contributed in Western aesthetic theory. And beyond its influence in literary criticism and dramatic theory, Aristotle's Poetics also reflected the broader philosophical commitment to empirical observation and a systematic analysis of human experiences, because he's approaching the art of poetry with the same rigor he brought to the study of biology or physics. Aristotle helped to establish the foundation for a more scientific, critical approach to the study of humanities. And then politics. Aristotle saw humans as inherently political animals, and he explored different forms of government, and he classified regimes based on who ruled and whether they ruled in their own interest or for the common good. It's like he created a Yelp review system for governments 2 millennia before Yelp ever existed. Aristotle's political philosophy was deeply rooted in his understanding of human nature and the role of the state in facilitating the flourishing of individuals and community. Unlike Plato, who envisioned the ideal society as one ruled by a philosophy king, Aristotle recognizes the diversity of political arrangements and the need to tailor governance to the specific circumstances and characteristics of a given population. So in his seminal work, Politics, Aristotle classified different regime types based on two key criteria: the number of rulers, so monarch, aristocrat, democracy, oligarchy, tyranny, and whether these rulers acted in the interest of the common good or solely for their own benefit. This typology reflected Aristotle's belief that the best form of government was one that promoted virtue, justice, and the overall well-being of the citizens. And Aristotle's political thought also emphasized the importance of civic participation, the rule of law, and the cultivation of practical wisdom in political leaders. He saw the state as a natural outgrowth of human sociability with the ultimate aim of enabling individuals to achieve flourishing through their engagement in public life. Maybe he should have ran for office. Aristotle's ideas about the nature of the state, the justification of political authority, and the virtues required for effective governance have continued to shape political theory and practice throughout the Western tradition. His insights have influenced everything from medieval political philosophy to modern theories of democratic republicanism and representative government. And then A, eudaimonia. This is Aristotle's concept of the highest human good, often translated as happiness or well-being. But it's not just about feeling good, it's about living a life of virtue in accordance with reason. It's like he's saying, don't just pursue happiness, pursue excellence, and happiness will follow. And eudaimonia was central to Aristotle's ethical framework, which saw the ultimate aim of human life as the realization of our full potential through the cultivation of virtue and reason. Unlike the more hedonistic or utilitarian concepts of the good life, his version was rooted in the idea of living a life of excellence in which our actions and choices were guided by practical wisdom and a commitment to the common good. For Aristotle, true happiness or well-being was not this fleeting emotional state, but rather a deep, lasting form of fulfillment that came from the realization of our essential nature as rational societal beings. And by developing the virtues such as courage, temperance, justice, and prudence, and exercising them in accordance with reason, individuals could achieve a state of eudaimonia that transcended mere pleasure or the satisfaction of base desires. And Aristotle's concept here has really continued to resonate with philosophers, ethicists, and psychologists alike, as they grapple with questions of what it means to live a truly good and also fulfilling life. And the idea that well-being is not just a subjective state, but rather a substantive achievement rooted in excellence of character, it's influenced everything from medieval Thomistic ethics to modern positive psychology. Moreover, Aristotle's emphasis on the role of the political community in cultivating the conditions of this flourishing has had a lasting impact on political theory, underscoring the importance of good governance and social institutions in enabling individuals for collective flourishing. His vision of the state as a means of promoting virtue for the common good, it does continue to inform debates about the proper scope and ultimately what is the purpose of political authority. Aristotle's influence it's so vast, it's honestly hard to overstate. He laid the groundwork for virtually every field of study in the Western tradition, whether you're not talking about biology, physics, psychology, literary criticism, or political science, you're going to find a bit of Aristotle's fingerprints on it. His works were lost for the West for centuries, but they were preserved by Islamic scholars, and then they were reintroduced to Europe in the Middle Ages, and it sparked an intellectual revolution. Medieval Christian theologians like Thomas Aquinas, they bent over backwards to reconcile Aristotelian philosophy with Christian doctrine. It's like Aristotle became the philosophical Justin Bieber of the 13th century. Suddenly everyone was trying to remix his greatest hits. And even today, many of Aristotle's ideas, they continue to shape our thinking. His concept of logic, it underpins computer science and artificial intelligence. His ethical theories still influence modern virtue ethics, and his idea of flourishing, it resonates with modern positive psychology. It's kind of like he left us with a philosophical Swiss Army knife that we're still trying to find all the uses for. Lasting legacy. Together, Socrates, Plato, and Aristotle, They form a kind of philosophical power trio. They're like the Led Zeppelin of ancient thought. Their ideas have reverberated through history, and they've shaped everything from Christian theology to modern science to political theory. Socratic Method continues to be used in law schools, ethics classes, and occasionally by parents trying to get their kids to admit they broke the vase. And it's a powerful tool for critical thinking and self-examination that it's as relevant today as it was in ancient Athens. Plato's theory of forms has influenced everything from medieval Christian theology, with God taking the place of the form of the good, to modern abstract mathematics. So anytime someone talks about the true essence of something, they're actually echoing Plato. And then Aristotle's systematic approach to knowledge, it laid the groundwork for the scientific method. His ethical and political theories, they continue to influence modern thought, and concepts like the golden mean, they pop up everywhere from self-help books to economic theories. The tension between Plato's idealism and Aristotle's empiricism, that has played out over and over again in the history of philosophy. It's sort of like the original philosophical Team Edward versus Team Jacob, but fewer werewolves and vampires. And these thinkers established philosophy as a distinct discipline and set the agenda for philosophical inquiry that continues to this day. Questions about the nature of reality, knowledge, ethics, and politics that they grappled with are still central to philosophical discourse today. And these ideas, their ideas have been transmitted, translated, interpreted, and reinterpreted countlessly over the centuries, whether it's St. Augustine adapting Plato's ideas for Christianity, Islamic scholars preserving and commenting on Aristotle, or modern philosophers critiquing and building on their ideas. The conversation these ancient Greeks started is still going. So even when modern thinkers reject their ideas, they often do so in ways that were shaped by the conceptual framework that these philosophers established. It's like they created the philosophical language that we're still using to have our debates. So the echoes of Socrates, Plato, and Aristotle, they can be heard throughout Western intellectual tradition, from the lofty realms of metaphysics to the everyday concerns of human behavior and social organization. Their ideas have proved to be remarkably enduring, shaping the way we think, question, and understand the world around us. So whether you are grappling with the nature of reality, the foundation of ethics, or the purpose of government, the ancient Greek philosophical tradition provides a rich and varied set of perspectives to draw upon. Even when we disagree with their conclusions that was reached by these thinkers, their rigorous methods and their insightful inquiries, they continue to shape and challenge us today.